Tom Rinaldi is my name, and the book that I'm here to talk a little bit about is The Red Bandana. In my day job, I'm a national correspondent for ESPN, where I've worked for about the last 15 years or so. Exactly 2 of you nodded your head. I really appreciate you, sir. Got you. Feel you right there. Feel you. Thank you. A lot of unknowing looks, and I can just say you can find us 206 DirecTV, your cable channels, etc. We are available for your viewing consumption. I do a lot of different things at ESPN, but my favorite thing by far is I get the chance to tell feature stories, human interest stories across all sport, if you will. No story I've had the chance to tell, for whatever reason, has resonated the way the story at the center of this book has. We had the opportunity to tell the story on television in 2011, and it has taken on a much greater and fuller life than I ever would have imagined, including a book. I wanted to start, if I could, not by telling you the story, but by posing a question. And here's the thing about the question. It's almost impossible to believe, but it's already left its launch, and it is making its way to you as you sit there right now. What would you do in the last hour of your life? What would you do? Imagine for a moment that you're healthy, that you're strong, that you're loved, that you have purpose, that you have a rich and full family life around you. Imagine all of that. What would you do? Now, if you'd indulge me, raise your hand if you're older than 24. This side of the room where the lights went out is very grateful. I understand that. I understand that. This is the story of a young man, Wells Crowther, and the final hour of his life when he was 24. The book tells the story of the family and the schools and the teams and the teachers and the coaches that shaped who he would become and ultimately factor into the decisions that he would make in the final hour of his life. When that final hour started, Wells Crowther was on the 104th floor of the South Tower of the World Trade Center. For a moment, I'd ask everyone here to think back to where you were on that morning. Who were you with? How did you discover what was happening? Take a few moments and pace yourself in your own mind back to where you were. I'll tell you where Wells Crowther was. On his desk at work, when at the last second, Flight 175, traveling nearly 500 miles an hour with 10,000 gallons of fuel, tilted its lower wing. And that wing exploded through the 78th floor of the South Tower, the sky lobby, the area where express elevators led out to all the local elevators that reached up to the highest floors. When that wing dipped at the last second, hundreds of people who were standing in the sky lobby, having conversations, going about their day, lost their lives in the next moment. The wing exploded through the south facade of the tower. It destroyed nearly everything in its path. Wells Crowther, who had been an athlete at Boston College, a volunteer firefighter growing up, an honors student, picked up the phone and called his mother to tell her that he was okay. He left a message, the final words his family would ever hear him say. He found stairwell A in the South Tower, the only functional stairwell left in the building. As he made his way down, he got to the 78th floor. and he made a choice. He walked into the floor, not knowing if it would give way beneath him, where the entire scene was likely more horrible than we can imagine. There were scores of dead and dying, people who moments before had been in the fullness of life and who are now dead. Fires were shooting out from the open elevator shaft. Smoke choked the entire atmosphere. He walked directly onto the floor and took something out. This simple thing. And he put it over his nose and mouth to guard against the smoke, and he shouted for people to follow him. He knew a way down. A young woman, a woman named Ling Young, was one of the people who heard him. She stood up. She had been terrified. She thought she was there for 10 minutes, unable to move, thinking the floor would collapse beneath her. But she heard that voice. She walked toward him. She went into the stairwell. A man followed her down. And then they saw Wells Crowther behind them. He was carrying a woman across his back. Down they went to the 61st floor, 17 flights. He put the woman down. The air had cleared. He implored them to continue downward. And he made a second choice. Where did he go? That's right. He went back up. Why did he do that? What was the fiber of that decision? Where did it come from? Back up he went, back onto the floor. He gathered a second group. They followed him. Down the stairs they went. Ultimately, Crowther made it all the way down to the lobby of the South Tower. Again, if you'd indulge me, raise your hand if you ever stepped into the World Trade Center. For those who had been there, and again, indulge me, in your mind, and you knew he would not have been walking at this pace, how long would that have taken to get there, to walk out, to the rest of his life at 24? He didn't walk toward Allen. He didn't go to the exit. He went the opposite direction to a command post set up by the FDNY because he believed likely he was the only person with firefighting experience who'd made it down. How do we know? Because when his remains were recovered 6 months later, he was the only civilian surrounded by more than a dozen members of the FDNY. That's how we know. The third choice that he made. One of the wonderful parts of my job is I work for a show called College Gameday. Come on now, let's hear it a little louder than that. Ah, the Southeast. We love you. We love you. I've worked for the show for the past 13 years. In that time, I've had the privilege of visiting more than 50 college campuses. One thing I'm always struck by, not just the great food, not just the creative signs, not just Coach Corso with the headgear, for those who know what I'm talking about. I'm struck by the passion and energy of the students. As they come and cross that threshold, and they commit to all of you in this room, yes, they're looking to learn and be edified and pass their courses and make friendships and grow. But they're also looking, I think, for something that connects us between the roots you give and the wings you provide. When the tassel turns and the degree is conferred and they walk into the rest of their lives, that connective tissue that we call character Where does it come from? What shapes it? And how will it manifest, God forbid, if in a moment we choose to go back up? Not to walk to Allen, but to walk away to the command center. This is not the story of a saint. It's the story of a young man 2 years removed from college after he turned his tassel. 1 month before 9/11, he called his father. He told him, "Dad, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can look at a computer for the rest of my life." His father said, "Excuse me? You are an investment banker who just made his way to the trading desk at Sandler O'Neill. You're good. We're good. Volunteer with me at the firehouse. We're good." And he said, "I think I want to join the FDNY. That's what I think I want to do with my life." When his mother and father, and for anyone who's a parent in this room, I ask you to try to consider what this would be like. When they walked into the apartment to clean it out and went through their son's papers, they found the application filled out and not yet mailed in. Twice in the history of the 150-year FDNY has it posthumously made someone a member of its ranks. This is the story of one of them. The last thing I'll leave you with, the dedication of the 9/11 Memorial Museum, which happened in 2014. As I'm sure so many of you know, 2,977 souls perished in that cataclysmic day. The President of the United States, Barack Obama, chose to speak by name about one, Wells Crowther. He knew the story, he'd met the family, and it's a story that endures. As Britt said, in such a fractured time, your task is more important than ever in bonding and uniting and having people realize the common ground that an education provides. And maybe the richest, deepest part of that soil is what it might allow that student to do 2 years after on a September day. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it.